Hello and welcome. My name is Octavius Black. I'm the CEO of MindGym, and I'm joined today by Kathy Wilson, our Chief Creative Officer, to welcome you all to today's webinar on getting from survive to thrive, as well as a hello to those who didn't quite make it because they're still feeling too overwhelmed by work to join us today. We appreciate the irony and we send you our support. The theme that we want to talk about is how to help people flourish whatever the pressure. Now, this is not a new theme by any stretch. Companies have been concerned with this challenge for many years, and that level of investment and commitment to improving the well-being of employees is increasing significantly. In 2009, we found that 54% of companies, or 57%, had a well-being initiative. That's up to 95% now. The average spend per employee on well-being is more than double what it was 5 years ago. And those well-being initiatives vary from the gym in the basement to a nurse or doctor coming in to help people understand their physical states. Even at humble MindGym, we have organic fruit delivered twice a week and a masseuse who comes in on Friday. We also, as many companies do, have flexible working policies and all sorts of other things to try and help the otherwise overwhelmed employee. So you might imagine, and one might hope, that for all this investment we'd have seen some kind of return, that people will be some way better off now as a result of this than they were before. But the reality is sadly the contrary. 2/3 of people today, employees, feel overwhelmed. We found that the level of absenteeism and the cost of absenteeism in the UK is higher than it's ever been, at £29 billion. In the US, on average, most people think that they won't be taking, 50% assume they won't be able to take a full holiday, and on average 9 vacation days are not used because people feel the demands of work are so great. This affects employment, engagement, it affects attention span, and affects everyone's performance at work, as well as their health and their risk of suffering from more serious illness and so forth. So this is a big challenge, and it's not one, again, that people are unaware of. Again, a recent study by Burson shows that 65% of business leaders rate the issue of the overwhelmed employee as either urgent or of high importance. And yet only 10% of organizations know what to do about it. And so we thought it was worth plundering the research and finding out where the evidence takes us on where we should be focusing our investments if we want to address this issue in our businesses. And so to start with, we're looking at where companies should turn their attention. Now, traditionally, attention has been focused on time. Where we think it should be increasingly is on energy. Telco asked us to do a training needs analysis for their managers, all of whom said, we don't have time to think. We're absolutely running ragged and we don't have time to understand what's going on or reflect or review or any of these things. So give us time to think, that's what we most need. So what we did was we ran a program. At lunchtime on the first day, we introduced the BlackBerry Spa. Now, this was the point to say your BlackBerry or iPhone or whatever portable device you have works almost as hard as you. So why don't we let them have a little break? And so we created what was in fact a cardboard box, but we asked them to imagine it was a spa so that your smartphone could get a little relaxation. And then people went into lunch. And we introduced them to what was the silent lunch. The idea was that they could sit and eat and think. There was the nearest thing to a corporate revolution, as people complained without any hint of the irony that we were wasting their time. But the challenge is not having more time, it's knowing what to do with the time when we've got it. And so the first focus is about moving from time to energy. The second is instead of trying to change the working environment to create more time in it, for example, or reduce the pressures, because those aren't going to change, and the need to do more with less is only going to increase, and the competitive pressures are only going to grow stronger, is to build our psychological strength so that we're able to cope better. Rather than being buffeted, we end up surfing or flourishing in the environment that's ever-changing around us. And therefore, to tend to add to the good work that's done on helping people think about sleeping and eating and exercise, all of which is beneficial, to moving this now onto phase 2, which is helping people think differently about the environment we find ourselves in at work and how we can choose to think in ways that will increase the chances that we don't just survive, but we thrive. And that means moving from a relationship where it seems the company's responsibility to fix this issue of the overwhelmed employee to all of our responsibilities. to look after ourselves and look after each other. And the role of the company is to enable this to happen, to provide the support and the psychological equipment so people can make better and more informed choices about how to look after themselves. So our starting point is, if you like, if those of you who've been flying recently will remember that when the oxygen masks come down, you're supposed to put your own on first before you attach one to those your loved ones around you, is the issue of self-care. Start with me. And if I can thrive in this environment, then others can see that it's possible, and then I'm in a good place to help others along with me. So to explain a bit more about how we can do this in a practical way, I'll hand over to Kathy.
Thanks, Octavius. We've seen so many self-help books in the marketplace, endless choices of books to look at that we hope will help us with feelings of being overwhelmed and how can we manage our lives more effectively. But what's interesting in our research is the popularity of a certain genre of book that probably wouldn't have been popular 10, 15 years ago. Brené Brown is an example of this. Brené Brown has captured everyone's imagination through her TED Talks and through her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, really with one core message, which is encouraging us to be brave enough to be vulnerable and not to chase perfection all the time. I doubt in the 80s that would have captured our imagination in the same way. Paul Gilbert's work on the compassionate mind, and again, focusing very much on helping us develop compassion to ourselves and compassion to others, shows the need that we have just to give ourselves a bit of a break and to reconnect with those around us. So they're just two examples. The other interesting trend that we're all aware of is the trend in mindfulness and how popular this has become, but also how it's been demonstrated to have a huge impact in our psychological well-being. And the Headspace app, interestingly, has reached, I think it is, just checking, 1 million users in 150 countries, which is really quite awesome for something that's so specific. And the TED Talk now, which is called All It Takes is 10 minutes of 10 mindful minutes, has now reached 4 million viewers. So it's interesting to look at what's out there, and what we have to do is help sift through what's useful and what's not useful to equip people to make better choices and to guide them more helpfully. One of the things that we wanted to really spend some time on is really understanding what thriving was. And again, based on the research, it's the joint experience of two things. The first is vitality, the degree to which we feel alive, energized, that we're sparking. And the other dimension is the degree to which we feel as if we're growing. We're growing as people, we're pushing out of our comfort zones, we're being challenged, and learning new skills and putting ourselves in new situations. And it's a combination of those two dimensions that puts us in that top right-hand quadrant. But a really important message has to be that it's unrealistic to expect to thrive all the time. And in creating this material, we've realized that the expectation itself that we should be thriving in today's environment puts a level of pressure on people that doesn't help. We're all struggling. To be thriving all the time would be very artificial. So actually what we need to do is become more aware of our patterns and how we move around these four quadrants. What's our overall pattern, and what is it that we do that tips us into one or other box? The more we become more aware of our pattern, the more we realize that actually there are certain things we can do to move more quickly from the bottom two quadrants to the top two. So for instance, if I look at that overall pattern for myself, I'd say that I thrive a lot of the time, probably 30% of the time. But I probably spend slightly more time in the bottom right-hand quadrant, the bound for burnout, which is as a result of taking on too much, assuming I can do too much in too little time, saying yes to too many things. And then what that results in is not spending enough time in the recharging box, the top left-hand corner, which is where I really need to spend, that will enable me to ultimately thrive more. So that's my pattern. Each of us will have a different pattern, but understanding what your overall recurrent pattern is will really help identify both the tipping points for you and your strategies for how you can move more effectively between those quadrants. And that's what we really want to equip people to be able to do more effectively, to make the right choices. That's at the macro level, but at the micro level, again, the research shows how bad we are at recognizing the state we're in at any particular moment in time, particularly if we're tipping into the bottom two quadrants. Sometimes you're only aware of how badly you're feeling and when it's too late. So using what we know to be predictors and indicators of positive psychological well-being, we've created a Thrive gauge that you can just check in with yourself and self-regulate on a day-to-day basis or on a weekly basis that gives you an indication just on a red, amber, green scoring, your own subjective view of how you're doing. So for instance, have I felt, in the past week, have I felt connected to people who make me feel good? For me, that's a green. That feels great. Have I been able to appreciate positive in my life? Maybe that's a bit more of an amber. Maybe I'm focusing on the things that aren't going so well for me at the moment. And it just gives you a sense of whether or not it's time to pay attention and whether or not it's time to make some different choices in what you're doing and how you're doing it. You can actually personalize this because each one of us has different indicators of whether we're on form or not. So you can add those in and actually have a much more personalized Thrive gauge that you can use as a practical tool readily. So becoming self-aware is absolutely a core component of thriving, and we're all trying to do it. But actually, often we can make the wrong choices. And we're aware that we all self-sabotage, and we're conscious of the literature on derailers, and the common ones are, unhealthy perfectionism, our tendency to compare and despair, our tendency to blame, our tendency to look at the negative, our tendency to procrastinate. All of these are out there, and these toxic thinking traps we have to get a grip of, and we know how important from the world of CBT it is to reframe those thoughts. But actually there are 3 other common pitfalls that can undermine us. The first one is the hedonic treadmill, where we think if we chase the next thing, the next car, the house, the experience, it's going to make us happy. And of course the research shows over and over again that we end up at the same baseline happiness as we were before. The feel-good factor is only temporary, but we fall into the trap, all of us fall into that trap regularly. The second pitfall is the fact that we think that we can predict what will make us happy in the future. And the work that Paul Gilbert's done and his book called Stumbling on Happiness just illustrates how appalling we are at getting that right and how inaccurate our predictions are. So rather than do that, what we should really be doing is looking at our past experience and looking at what's made us happy, what's made us thrive in the past, because that's a much better predictor of what will help us in the future. And the third pitfall is really the pleasure loop, and we've talked about it in pleasure loop because actually it's that kick that we're getting from the world that we're in, this world of being never offline, the instant gratification stimulation we're getting from the technology, constant busyness. It's even been proven recently that we get a dopamine hit from hearing our phones ping. Some people who are really addicted to their phones have been proved to get a sensation of phantom vibrations from their phone even when their phone's not on. So it's very extreme, but that hit we're getting of adrenaline and dopamine just keeps us going and going faster and faster. And these are cycles and these are loops that we have to break out of, and we have to be aware of their power because the power is immense. So if we actually think about the building blocks of what helps us thrive, there are some really fundamental ones that that we all, I'm sure, are well aware of. But there's 2 here that are worth highlighting just in the interest of time that might be less well known. The first is progress, the progress principle. And this is based on a fascinating piece of research by Teresa Amabile, from Harvard, who did a longitudinal study actually looking into what really affects our inner work life. So the dialogue that goes on in our head day to day, what are the contributing factors that make for a good day in our heads and make for a bad day? And she compiled this over 15 years, looked at 64,000 different recordings of what constituted key events. And the one contributing factor that had the biggest impact on making for a good day was the feeling of progress, the feeling of making progress. By contrast, the one biggest contributing factor that really got in the way and contributed to a bad inner work life, a bad inner work dialogue, was a sense of setback. So what can we do to help ourselves feel like we're making progress often when we feel like we're wading through mud and we're not getting anywhere and we're just busy but making no progress? We can work hard at doing that for ourselves, but we can work hard also at doing it for others, especially if we're in a managerial position. The second point on the bottom slide there, belief that we'll be successful. Professor Michelle Ryan, who's on our academic board, is a social psychologist from Exeter, and she's equally done some research that looking into what makes us believe we have work-life balance, and her findings were striking and unusual in the sense that the one thing that makes the difference between whether or not we believe we have a good work-life balance is nothing to do with the hours we spend at work, nothing to do with any obvious variables. The biggest contributor is whether or not we believe we'll be successful in our roles at work. That's the biggest contributing factor to giving us a sense of a positive work-life balance. So if you imagine that these are our foundation stones, then we have to think about actually there are some day-to-day choices that we need to make, and what we really want to be doing with the interventions that we have is actually helping people make day-to-day choices both in what they do and what they think that will enable them to thrive and have a cumulative effect. So we know already that from the research that, for instance, that connection with others is really, really key. A lot of research to show how it buffers stress and how it enhances your life cycle. But actually, do we really know who we need to be connecting with? Shelley Gable has done some research that shows that it does matter who you connect with, and actually often we can categorize people friendship in terms of who's there for us when things go badly wrong. Her research shows that that's actually less relevant in terms of helping us thrive in the long term. What's really important is who's there for us when things go well, who makes us feel even better when things are going well for us, who elevates us further. So her research showed 4 categories of people. Octavius, do you mind just playing these characters? So if you just imagine, I'm going on holiday, I'm really excited about it. So Octavius, number 1.
Holiday? Oh, okay. Can we get on with this report? Because I'd quite like to work on this, please, if we can.
This is the disinterested person. He's just not giving you any attention at all. Category number 2.
Oh, that would be a nightmare. The flights, the pilots are on strike, and there's a horrible forecast. I don't think it would be so great.
I'm immediately brought back down to earth by that. Person number 3.
I've just been on holiday in Barbados, went to the Four Seasons, got upgraded to the suite. Amazing place. Where are you going again?
Oh, yeah, I'm not going to feel good about my holiday in France now. And fourthly.
I'm so pleased you're going on holiday. It's so deserved. Tell me more. Where are you going?
So just a quick illustration of the types of reactions you can get, and we're all familiar with this. We're familiar with the typical responses we might get from the people around us. But what's really important is thinking very actively about who you spend your time with. You do have a choice. So the more you can get the balance between, the more you can focus on those people who actually elevate you further when things are going well, the better it will be for you in terms of your thriving ability. A second day-to-day tactic and choice is about really leveraging the positive experiences that you have. So we know this from the work that Martin Seligman has done in positive psychology over many years now. But actually, how much time do we really give it, and how much do we actually really train our brains to focus on the positive and savor it and actually use it to build resources in us for the next time? Professor Elaine Fox, who's on our academic board as well, is a neuropsychologist based out of Oxford, and she's working extensively on how to modify the brain away from being what she calls rainy brain to being sunny brain, how to really get that balance right. So again, it's not just about having the positive experience, but we're so typical in today's world, moving on to the next thing, forgetting about how good that was or the evening you've just had, just concentrating on the next either problem or challenge that you've got to go through. Instead, how can you make the most of something? So again, I just want to ask Octavius about, have you had an experience that was positive this week?
Yes, I had a lovely experience. It was very positive. I spent the previous 2 weeks out in America promoting our new book out there, and I came home. It was the longest I've ever been away from my 4-year-old daughter. And on Monday, I walked her to school, and it was the most glorious experience, walking down the street with her on a scooter, stopping by the pavement, waiting for the green man to come on, holding hands, crossing the road together. It was magical.
So the extra bit is to really interrogate that experience. So what did it make you feel really grateful for?
It made me feel really grateful for having my daughter. and for having time with her.
And so, what was it that you did specifically that helped create the positive feeling and the positive experience?
I did some of those things you mentioned earlier, Kathy. I turned off my phone, and I was totally and utterly focused and dedicated to this journey to school. And nothing else crossed my mind during that period, and nothing else interrupted it.
So for you, what is the key positive insight you can take with you into the future to build into other experiences?
That however long or short the moment is, to be totally in that moment and to engage completely with it and not let other things get in the way. And it's a 12-minute walk. It was not a long period of time, but it would be really easy to have been distracted by other things or look for other stimulation. And the fact that I didn't and was totally absorbed with her and ensuring the journey was both safe and enjoyable made it very, very special. And so I think being in the moment, being present is really important.
So just by reconnecting with that experience and looping it around and savouring it, it builds the experience even more. You can get more from it. And we would encourage people to either keep a journal to do that, but probably more effectively is to do that for each other. Do that with the people you're around so that you can help them spend the time really digging deep and thinking, what was it that was so good about that? And what did it give me? And what will it give me in the future? Finally, we're just giving you a few examples here of what we're calling energy bars, which are your day-to-day choices that you make, and how can you build those into your life so that they can help you. And a huge part of this is actually about your protective habits, and we'd see these almost as precursors to thriving. So there's 4 key categories that make a huge difference in terms of our well-being. The first one, vitality, there is, we know about, it's about our sleep, it's about our nutrition, it's about our exercise. We won't cover that off. We've talked about connection, but the importance of having habits in your life that enable you to connect with those that you love and those that actually make you feel good, know you for who you are, and take you through life. Growth we talked about right at the start, which is to look at your habits in terms of the degree to which they're helping you grow and learn and experiment with new things and take on new challenges. You know, how much can you look back in the last month and think, actually, I've got some habits that are really helping me. I've taken on that extra course, I've read that new book, or I had a conversation with someone about a topic I didn't understand and I went and researched it afterwards. But probably the most important in today's world is the issue of focus. We know how damaging it is to have split focus, and attentional focus is hard. We're at the beck and call of our technology. We're letting it control us. That's probably the most important part of focus. So as well as managing our attention in the chunks of time where we can concentrate, and the recommendation is up to 90 minutes, and then taking proper breaks between those, and I mean proper breaks where you can go for a walk, 10 minutes, see some trees, come back again. Actually, what are you doing to really control your technology? So to what degree are you able to have meals with friends and family without the phone on? Have you got a device-free room at home? Or are you checking your emails last thing at night, first thing in the morning, even across the weekend? How able are you to manage your email traffic rather than reacting to it? Those sorts of habits are going to really dictate the degree to which you're able to thrive in the future. So these are just a few examples of interventions that can make a difference.
So I think the challenge now for us as businesses is, where do we focus our efforts in order to increase the well-being and reduce the sense of people feeling overwhelmed? And in an ideal world, we might choose to help everybody increase their self-care, but that might require a level of investment that businesses will find hard to do at the moment, especially in the current era of austerity. Equally, there's an old-fashioned view, as we see it, of a top-down approach. If only we can get the senior leaders to do this, everyone will start modeling and copying them. The research shows that that is far from certain to deliver that outcome and can take a long time and dissipate the message on the way. And again, we come back again and again to the evidence, which suggests the way to focus to get most investment is to focus on the middle, to go to managers in and around our organizations, because they're the people who have the knock-on effect. If I see my boss coping well, then I'm more likely to find a way of coping and calming myself. If my boss is rushing around all frantic and frenetic and under pressure and very emotional, then that's going to affect me and my mood, my sense of belonging and being able to be myself. And so when we had done the research on what are the 7 talents that make most difference for managers, the 7 things that managers are best at will have most impact on the performance of their teams and the people around them. Many of them will be familiar to those of you who run management development programs, things like coaching and executing and directing, and others will be fairly familiar how we build appropriate working relationships. But one we found is as important as most of the others is the ability to thrive, the ability of managers to look after themselves so that they're in a good place and therefore they can help and look after others. If like taking the oxygen mask in the airplane analogy further, they put it on and they're breathing and they're doing well, and then they can pass it on to those in their team. And where we run management development programs based around these 7 talents, for example, the global program we're fortunate enough to be running with Unilever at the moment, the thrive element that managers have really run to and said, this is a fantastic way of helping me be more successful in my role as a manager, as helpful as any of the other talents that sit around this. So that's good theory, good practice. We thought we'd also share with you one example of putting it very much into play and measuring the impact. And this is for an American bank that ran a program over a series of weeks on how to help improve my own well-being. It was run with branch managers, regional managers, and the regional directors. And this was about 4 areas looking after body, mind, heart, and soul, and how I could put those in a better place. And what they did was they ran it with a group, randomly selected, and compared it with a control group. And not only did we find that 71% reported improved productivity and performance, they had better relationships with customers, better relationships with colleagues. They also, and this is the bottom line story, increased loan revenues significantly and also increased deposit revenues significantly against the control group. So actually helping people thrive not only makes good personal sense and pretty good moral sense, it actually makes good financial sense as well. So we hope we've given you a little bit of an insight in our thinking and what the research tells us and hopefully is useful for you about the challenge of the overwhelmed employee, where our investment has been in the past predominantly on areas like well-being programs, why this isn't sufficient, and what else we can do to help people care for themselves and the benefits that brings. Those of you that know MindGym well will know that we offer 90-minute workshops called Workouts, being a gym, on a range of subjects, and Workout Pros, which is a new area we've launched, which are 180 minutes that go a little deeper. Much of the tools that Kathy talked about earlier are included both in the Workout Pro on Thrive and also in a series of our workouts, from vitality and bounce back to cresting the curve, how we deal with change, give me strength, how I play to my strengths, and 2 particularly focused on stress, 1 stress in the immediate term, stress busters, and 1 how do we get to the broader purpose, the bigger issues that Kathy was talking about in Sorted for Stress. We hope this has provided you some break in your day, as Kathy talked about, an interruption, if nothing else, but we thank you enormously for taking the time to be part of this conversation, and we hope to hear from you soon. Anything else from you, Kathy?
No, just thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed. Bye for now.